Yo guys, you ever post a video and think, dang, I wish I just had an effect that would make people go, wow, that looks really good? Well, you're in luck, because in today's video, I'm going to show you the secret sauce to this amazing impact that people really like. Grab your tea, get ready, and let's get straight into this tutorial. And feel free to subscribe and like this video because, you know, it helps out a lot. Let's check this out. All right, this is the final project that we're gonna be cooking up, and the project file for this is actually in the description below. So if you wanna spend like a super cheap price to get this amazing project file, check out my Payhip. The link is in the description below. So I'm using GTA 2 by Rarin. Let's play this back and see what we're working with. So I started a composition in After Effects, just a 30 frames per second short 30-second composition. Now before we look at the clip, I want to look at the spot in the song that I want the impact to start and where I want the impact to end. So let's just zoom in on this song here and play it out. Never had a gas off. Alright, so that beat right there is where we want the impact to start. So I'm going to set a marker right there. Right click that and just call this, just for tutorial sakes, this is just super simple. I'm going to call that marker start impact. So I put my mask on. Okay, and then I'm going to set a marker there because on that beat, when this beat comes back in, I'm going to right click and call that the end marker. So it doesn't matter what song you're using or like how long you want this impact to be. Just make sure that you give yourself a little bit of time for this impact to play out so that by the time that the 3D impact finishes, it goes back into the clip on the right beat on the song. So now I can import my clip. Now for the start impact, I want to go to the frame right before the player shoots. So I'm going to choose that frame and then just split the clip there and put the end marker to be right when the character does shoot, so right there. So obviously you'll probably want to sync this, and if you want a full syncing tutorial, you can click the top right to watch that because I've made a tutorial on syncing, but for now I'm just going to focus on the impact. So I'm going to start the clip here and I'm not even going to sync it yet. So let's go to the start impact, and this is where we want the 3D like cool thing to happen. So the thing about this 3D impact, when it starts, it's actually a freeze frame. So we need to duplicate this layer by clicking Ctrl D, and we need to freeze this frame right before the impact. So I'm going to take this frame by clicking Alt left bracket, and then we can right click that layer and go to time and freeze frame. So now if we extend that out, we have a freeze layer. Now this is the layer we're going to use to set up the 3D scene, so I can right click that and pre-compose it and just call it base layer so we just don't miss that later. I like to pre-comp that layer because then if we want to add color effects to the freeze frame, we can just open up that pre-comp much later on. So we need to take this freeze frame and separate it into a background layer and a character layer. So to do that, I'm going to duplicate the layer. So I'm going to click G and just zoom in here and create a small mask on the character. Okay, I masked out my character, so I'm going to click F on that layer and just feather a little bit on the mask that I just made. So that should be good. So if I solo this layer, it's looking pretty good. So what I would want to do is click this cube to make it a 3D layer. If you can't see that, then just click toggle switches and modes. Now this is where the 3D animation would happen, where I would click P on the background layer, then I could zoom this out and add some sort of animation with it. But the problem is the character is still there on this background layer, and we can't have that for the animation, and we need to paint out the character in this background layer so that when it zooms out it still looks good. So you can do that in After Effects or you can do it in Photoshop. So I'll show you guys how to do it both ways in case you want to know how. So first I'm going to duplicate this base layer, toggle switches and modes, and make it an alpha inverted matte. And I'm gonna disable that background layer. So that area that we just masked out, that character, this base layer is now going to take up all of the areas except for where we just masked out, which is good because now we can tell After Effects to content aware fill that. So if I open up my content aware fill tab, you can see it's opening up this little tab where it knows that this is what it needs to fill in. Now, if I just clicked generate fill layer right now, it would fill all of this entire composition up. And I don't want that because I just need this one frame since it's a freeze frame. So I can click B and N, narrow down my workspace. Now that's gonna narrow down my workspace because B starts the workspace and N ends the workspace. So now it's just going to fill in this one frame. And that's it. So then I can click generate fill layer. And that's good, but we have some like edges going on here that look kind of weird. Like it's actually a pretty good fill though, but I'm gonna Control Z to undo that. And first, to get rid of those edges that we just saw on that mask layer, I'm going to use an effect called Simple Choker. If you're wondering how I'm looking up effects like that, I'm using a free plugin by Video Copilot called FX Console. So you just look up Simple Choker and then choke the matte in a negative direction, and that's going to make the transparent area a bit bigger. So now if I generate the fill layer one more time, now it's just a little more clean. I could use a little work. I think I overdid it. So I'm gonna put that a little closer to 0. Just lower the simple choke, and that's at least a bit better. So it's okay if this isn't even that good. Like obviously the face here is just like, if you really want to make this look perfect, you could spend some time painting it out, obviously, but I think this will do for now. So what that just did is it generated one frame of this fill layer right here. So I'm actually just gonna right click that fill layer and go to time and freeze frame it. And then I can just drag that out to match up with everything. And my workspace is still one frame, so I'm just gonna go to the beginning and go to the end and reset my start and end points for my workspace. So I have the fill layer, it's taking up all the space that I need, but I still need my masked out layer that I just masked. So I need to go to that layer with the mask, and I'm going to undo that alpha inverted track matte below it. So no track matte on that, and then I can re-enable the mask and take off the simple choker. And we can't see it because the fill is on top, so we need to put that fill right below the mask layer. And now we can actually pre-comp the fill with the background layer and right click pre-compose and just call this empty background. So now if I solo this, we have an empty background that's going to be used for the 3D scene. And to keep this clean, I'm going to go to my base layer with the mask and just rename that as character mask. So we have our character mask, and then we have our empty background. And if you guys want to know how to use this empty background on Photoshop and to content aware it on Photoshop instead of After Effects, if I open this up and I started from scratch, I could use FX Console to take a picture, or I could save it as a frame in After Effects and then copy it to my clipboard, open up Photoshop, start a new file, open up a 1920, and then Control V to paste that in. And then I could mask out in Photoshop this area with the character, and then Shift delete that and content aware. And obviously that works too. You can do it whatever way you want. And if you want to get more specific with it, you can just be more detailed when you mask it out. So now we have everything we need to just do the fun part. So first we have to toggle switches and modes and make sure we can enable these as 3D layers. So now that these are 3D layers, if I click C, I can actually control the camera movement. And we're gonna animate this later, but just so you can see what I'm talking about, the character layer is in the same exact position as the empty background layer. So I can actually click P on that mask layer and take the Z position and move it back. And now if I move my camera around, you can see that we're in 3D space where the character is just moved back. But now it's not lined up with the clip. So to fix that, you can click S on that mask layer, and then you can lower down the scale. So even though it's in a different position in Z depth, its scale still lines up with the background layer. So that's the idea. My camera's in a weird spot, so I'm gonna click this and then reset to default camera. So the scale, so we just wanna move these back and adjust the scale. So I'm gonna click Shift P and Shift S to take out my character mask position and scale, and then just mess around with these values a little bit. Just make sure it's lined up, but the Z position is different. And then on the empty background layer, we can also click P and then Shift S to move that layer back in space and then scale it up a little bit. And great, so that's looking good. And then we can right click somewhere in this composition and create a new camera, and we'll just keep that as camera 1 settings. And we just want to start this camera for the duration of this impact. So if I twirl open the properties on this camera, I can animate all these things. And that's great if I start setting those stopwatches and like messing around with the animations, you know? We could get something that looks pretty cool. But clearly as I'm messing around with the X rotation, it's getting a little weird. You know, position's kind of cool. We could probably do something with that. But overall, I feel like these are just kind of hard to work with because the anchor point's all weird. So I'm gonna reset the transform and get rid of all of these keyframes. And instead, I'm going to control this camera with a 3D null object. So I'm gonna right click here, create new null object. And I'm going to click the cube here to make that a 3D layer. And then I can parent the camera to that null object, which means that now this camera will do anything that this null object does. I'm gonna keep this organized, just trim off the ends here, and then take this null object, go to transform, and set keyframes on position, and the X, Y, and Z rotation and the orientation as well. I can take all those keyframes, put them at the start of the impact, and now you can just move this however you want. I'm gonna start moving this backwards a little bit, and you can mess around with whatever animations you want. Like once you get this in 3D space, it's pretty fun to just see wherever you want to take it. Now for tutorial's sake, I'm just gonna animate the position and nothing else. So I'm gonna select those keyframes and easy ease them with F9, go to my speed graph, and this is just changing the position. I don't know why all this stuff is highlighted. I'm just changing the position. I think it should just be a much faster animation. It's like this. So that's looking good. Then I can also go to my empty background layer and click on position and Shift R to take out my 3D rotation properties as well. Select all those keyframes, put them at the start, and then mess around with the orientation of this as well. So I'm gonna full flip the X rotation. Just to do the most basic example for this tutorial, I think that's gonna look pretty cool. So obviously if we play that, it looks super dumb. So we need to select both of those keyframes and easy ease them, enable motion blur right here, and just give it a really sharp curve or a peak in the speed graph. And I'm using the speed graph because if we right click and go to the value graph, you can also do it here, but I think that the speed graph is gonna be easier since that's what we're using for the position. That way you don't have to separate the dimensions. So once we animate that, this is what we have. Gas off, I was for me, so I put my mask on. Keep it to me. So it's pretty good, it's just a little dull. So I'm gonna go to this camera and click on the position keyframe, and we're going to put a position keyframe at the start, and then also zoom out, move it around a little bit, and just put it somewhere else. And then easy ease those keyframes at the start and end. And we're just making like another little camera animation here. Now that's cool and all, but now the screen is over there. Now I'm gonna go to this empty background layer that we've already got the X rotation animation happening on, and I'm gonna move it over here. And I'm also going to move the Y rotation. And all I'm doing is just lining it up with the camera again, because this extra little movement here is when we combine the graph editor animations with this realignment is when the effect starts to get really clean. I'm actually going to reposition it entirely to fully fit the screen of the camera. There's like a lot of different directions this effect could go. So once you have full control over this 3D scene, you can really start animating it however you want. I'm just doing like a random example. Cool. So now we can select all of those keyframes we just made and select all of those. Position Y and Z is what we just adjusted. Now I'm going to select those and easy ease them with F9. And we want that to happen all the way at the end. So I'm going to drag all of these keyframes to peak at the end. I'm taking the right handle on the speed graph and dragging it all the way to the right. And I'm taking the left handle on the speed graph and dragging it all the way to the right as well. Had to gas off. I was for me, so I put my mask on. So as you can see, it's like working its way back into the clip. I think I can scoot these keyframes back to the frame before just so that it lines up better. And that's looking good. Now we can do a similar thing with the character mask. So I'm gonna click P, Shift R to take out the 3D rotations and the position, and go to this end marker and move it back so that this just lines up. It's clearly like a little clumsy because we're adjusting all of these things that are a bit weird in space. So on that character mask, I just adjusted the position and the Y rotation. So I'm going to select those keyframes, easy ease those keyframes, go into the graph editor, and speed graph is still good. And I'm going to take the right handle and drag it to the right, just like we did for the empty background layer, and take the left handle and drag it all the way to the right as well. That should line up with the layer. So we've got a camera animation going on, and then we've got the character mask and the empty background layer following those camera animations. So let's see how that looks. So we can even add like shakes to that. So if I add S shake, I'm gonna lower the amplitude, take off the reflections. We can even take that shake, copy it onto the background layer, and then adjust the amplitude and frequency, mess the settings around a little bit just so it's different. And now another animation that I think would be really cool to have to just spice up this animation more would be if I went to this null object that is connecting the camera, and now this Y rotation, I'm gonna set a keyframe on that, put it at the beginning, and then just move it all the way around like that. So that's gonna be a full 360, put that second keyframe at the end of that layer, select both those keyframes, click F9 to easy ease them, and then go into the graph editor. And we want this to happen in the middle really fast. So this peak right here in the graph editor on the speed graph means that it's gonna go slow and then boom, really fast. It's gonna just revolve around the characters. So hopefully this isn't too much. Let's just see what it looks like. God damn, dude, that is fire. Okay, I really like that. We're gonna keep that. Now we just need some effects and some overlays. So I'm gonna use this website called productioncrate.com. I use this website a lot, and there's a link in the description below, which if you sign up, not only do you get amazing overlays, but it actually helps to support me a little bit as well. So the link is in the description. Feel free to check it out. So I just went and added some overlays here. So for example, I have this ash, this falling ash, and then I have these embers in the background as well. So I've combined these with some impacts. I am going to be releasing an editing pack soon, so stay tuned for that. So I've got some impacts going on, and then I added some text inside of this pre-comp here. And yeah, just a bunch of color effects and impacts, and a little build-up. So that leads us to the final product where we combine this 3D animation with all of the sauce. Let's check it out. So that is the sauce. That is how I make my insane 3D impact, and that's the tutorial. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. I love you all so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And stay cozy, stay comfy, and stay hydrated. Peace.